The translator glitched 3 times before anyone noticed. Daniel Reyes caught it on the 4th glitch. The Drenix admiral had said temporary peace, but the translation showed eternal surrender. Small difference. Galaxy-ending difference. Daniel raised his hand. The massive council chamber fell silent. 12 species watched from their floating platforms. Some breathed oxygen, some breathed methane. One didn't breathe at all. "There's an error in the translation," Daniel said. Counselor Urix, a being made of swirling purple gas contained in a glass sphere, rotated toward him. "The human delegate has something to add." The admiral said temporary. "Your system translated it as eternal. That's why the Morvathi delegation looks ready to start shooting." Everyone turned to look at the insectoid Morvathi. Their ambassador, a creature called Trellis who stood 8 feet tall on 6 legs, had indeed raised his weapon arms into attack position. The translation was fixed. The Morvathi lowered their arms. The Drenix admiral, a scarred reptilian named Sorven, gave Daniel a look that might have been respect or hunger, hard to tell with Drenix. This was Daniel's job, human diplomatic attaché to the Galactic Arbitration Council. Fancy title, simple work. He watched, he listened. He caught the small things that big egos missed. The Morvathi and Drenix had been killing each other for 200 years. The war had started over a planet called Hollow's Rest. Both species claimed it as sacred ground. Now it was a radioactive wasteland. Neither side could live there. Both sides kept fighting anyway. "We require neutral oversight for the disarmament process," Counselor Urix announced. "Both fleets will surrender their weapons to an impartial party." Admiral Sorven laughed. It sounded like rocks grinding together. "And who would that be? The Morvathi will never trust anyone we approve. We will never trust anyone they approve." Ambassador Trellis clicked his mandibles in agreement. "The reptile speaks truth for once. No species in this council has remained neutral." "What about the humans?" someone asked. Daniel looked up. Everyone was staring at him. "Humans have been in the galactic community for only 80 years, Urix said. "They have no history with either species, no trade agreements, no territorial disputes. They are insignificant enough to be trusted." Daniel wasn't sure if that was an insult or a compliment, probably both. "One human," Admiral Sorven snorted. "To inspect 2 fleets, he'll be dead before he finishes the first ship." "Not dead," Ambassador Trellis corrected. "Just lost. Our ships are very confusing for primitive species." Daniel stood up. "I accept." The chamber went quiet again. Even Urix stopped swirling. "You accept?" the counselor asked. "Sure, I'll inspect both fleets, catalog every weapon, make sure you both follow the disarmament agreement." Daniel shrugged. "How hard can it be?" Admiral Sorven and Ambassador Trellis looked at each other. For the first time in 2 centuries, they shared the same expression. They thought Daniel was an idiot, a useful idiot, but an idiot nonetheless. The vote passed. Daniel was given authority to board any ship, access any system, and demand any information. Both species agreed because they were certain he would fail. The war would continue. The disarmament was just theater. After the session, Daniel returned to his quarters. Lieutenant Kira Okonkwo was waiting for him. She was his military analyst, assigned to help him understand weapons he'd never seen before. "You know this is a trap," Kira said. "Both sides will hide their real weapons. They'll show you the old stuff, the broken stuff. Then they'll shake hands, sign the treaty, and start fighting again next month." "Probably," Daniel agreed. "So why did you accept?" Daniel pulled up his classified files. Intelligence reports that had cost 3 human agents their lives to obtain. Both fleets had secret weapon caches, planet killers hidden in hollowed-out asteroids, biological weapons that could end entire species. Neither side had declared these weapons. Neither side planned to. "Because someone told me to disarm them completely," Daniel said, "and I always follow orders." Kira looked at the files. Her face went pale. "Daniel, if you expose these weapons, both sides will kill you. If you ignore them, billions will die when the war resumes. Then I won't expose them or ignore them. What's the third option? Daniel smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had spent 3 years in the Combat Engineering Corps, building bridges while people shot at him, finding solutions that weren't in any manual. I'm going to build something, he said, something neither side has ever seen before. A weapon. Better than a weapon. Daniel closed the files. I'm going to build a reason for them to stop fighting. Kira stared at him. That's impossible. They've been at war for 200 years. Their entire economies depend on it. Their governments, their religions, their identities. You can't just make them stop. Watch me. The next morning, Daniel boarded a shuttle to the Drennick's flagship. He carried no weapons, no scanning equipment, no secret technology. He carried a fabrication license, unlimited access to both ships' manufacturing bays. He'd requested it as a necessary tool for inspection purposes. Both species had approved it without thinking. After all, what could one human possibly build that would matter? They were about to find out. The Drennick's flagship smelled like burning metal and old blood. Daniel noticed this immediately because humans notice smells. The Drennicks did not. They had stopped smelling it centuries ago. Weapons Master Grawl met him at the docking bay. The Drennick's officer was 7 feet of scaled muscle and barely hidden contempt. His eyes tracked Daniel the way a predator tracks something too small to be a threat, but annoying enough to crush. Human, Grawl said, you will see what we allow you to see. You will touch nothing. You will ask no questions. Actually, Daniel said, I'll see everything, touch whatever I need, ask as many questions as I want. That's what the treaty says. Grawl's tail slammed against the deck plating. Treaties are words, words change. So do weapons. Daniel held up his data pad. Speaking of which, your manifest says you have 42 plasma cannons. I count 47 mounting points on your hull. Want to explain the math? Grawl went very still. Then he laughed. It was not a friendly sound. Perhaps the human is not completely stupid. Come, I will show you our plasma cannons, all 42 of them. The inspection took 6 hours. Daniel cataloged weapons, scanned power cores, and recorded serial numbers. Everything matched the official declarations. Everything was exactly where it should be. Everything was also obviously wrong. The power readings didn't match the weapons. A plasma cannon that big should draw twice as much energy. Either the Drennicks had impossibly efficient technology or these cannons were shells, display models. The real weapons were somewhere else. Daniel said nothing. He just smiled and made notes. That night his shuttle jumped to the Morvathi carrier. Different ship, same lies. Hive sister. Chelik escorted him through corridors that clicked and hummed with insectoid activity. The Morvathi ship was wet, humid, organic in ways that made Daniel's skin crawl. You are inefficient, Chelik observed. 1 inspector for 2 fleets, your species sent only 1. Humans are good at multitasking. Humans are good at dying. You are soft, slow, your senses are dull, your lifespans are brief. Why does your species survive? Daniel shrugged, stubbornness mostly. Chelik made a sound that might have been laughter or disgust. The translator couldn't tell. The Morvathi weapons were beautiful in a horrible way. Biological agents that could rewrite DNA. Acid sprayers that dissolved metal and bone equally. Hive bombs that released millions of mindless drones programmed to eat everything organic. All officially declared, all present and accounted for, all absolutely not the worst things on this ship. Daniel found the discrepancy in the food storage. The ship's crew consumed a certain amount of nutrients per day. The storage capacity was 3 times what they needed. Either the Morvathi really loved snacks, or those extra tanks held something else. He said nothing, he just smiled and made notes. Back on his shuttle, Kira was waiting with analysis. Both ships are lying, she confirmed. Power signatures suggest hidden compartments throughout both vessels. The Drenics have at least 12 concealed weapon bays. The Morvathi are using biological storage as cover for something massive. Planet killers, Daniel said. Both sides have them. Both sides plan to use them the moment the treaty is signed. So what do we do? Report them. The Council will demand proof. By the time we get it, both fleets will hide everything again. Daniel pulled up the fabrication license on his datapad. I requested manufacturing access. For scanning equipment. That's what I told them. He started typing specifications. But I'm going to build something else first. What? Chairs. Kira stared at him. Chairs. The Drenics have terrible posture, did you notice? Their ships weren't designed for comfort. They stand or crouch. After a few years, their spines compress, causes chronic pain, makes them irritable. You want to build chairs for the people hiding planet-destroying weapons. And humidity systems for the Morvathi. Their ships are wet, but not wet enough. Their exoskeletons crack in the dry sections. It's painful, makes them aggressive. Kira sat down slowly. Daniel, explain this to me like I'm 5 years old. Daniel turned to face her. His expression was calm, patient, the expression of someone who had figured something out that no one else could see yet. Everyone expects me to find their weapons. They're ready for that. They have plans for that. What they're not ready for is someone who notices they're uncomfortable, someone who fixes small problems without being asked, someone who treats them like people instead of enemies. You think chairs and humidity will end a 200-year war? No, but I think it will make them talk to me, really talk, and once they start talking, I'll learn things no scanner could ever find. He transmitted the specifications to both ships' fabrication bays. Custom furniture for the Drenics, atmospheric adjusters for the Morvathi, small gifts, tiny kindnesses. Weapons no one would recognize until it was too late. Grawl received his chair the next day. He sat in it for 3 hours without moving. When Daniel came to continue his inspection, the weapons master looked at him differently. Human, Grawl said, why? Why what? Why would you do this? We are not allies, we are not friends. I have killed humans before. I would kill you if ordered. Daniel sat down across from him. When's the last time someone did something for you without wanting something in return? Grawl didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. The real inspection had begun. 2 weeks changed everything. It started with the chairs. Drenics officers who had suffered back pain for decades suddenly found relief. Word spread through the ship. The human inspector wasn't just counting weapons. He was making furniture. Then came the humidity systems on the Morvathi carrier. Workers who had lived with cracked exoskeletons their entire lives felt moisture on their shells for the first time. They moved easier, slept better. Some of them cried, though they would never admit it. Daniel didn't ask for anything in return. He just kept building. Comfortable sleeping platforms, better lighting, food dispensers that actually worked, small things, stupid things, things that no one important would ever notice. The unimportant people noticed. Pritha Sharma arrived on day 10. She was a human engineer, specialist in adaptive manufacturing. Officially, she was there to help Daniel build better scanning equipment. Unofficially, she was there because the project had grown beyond what one person could handle. You're insane, Pritha said, watching Daniel program another fabrication sequence. You know that, right? You're supposed to be finding weapons. Instead, you're running a furniture store. The weapons aren't going anywhere, Daniel replied. But these people are. They're opening up, talking to me. Yesterday, a Drenics gunner told me about his family. He has 3 children. He hasn't seen them in 6 years. So he also told me which deck the real plasma cannons are hidden on. Not directly, but he mentioned that certain areas are off-limits to regular crew, areas that don't appear on any official map. Pritha went quiet. She was beginning to understand. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source. A young Drenics officer named Drenic. He was barely an adult by his species standards, too young to remember a time before war. too young to hate properly. Daniel found him sitting alone in a cargo bay, staring at nothing. "Problem?" Daniel asked. Drennick looked up. His scales were dull, his eyes were tired. "My grandfather died yesterday. The message just arrived." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He died in battle, honorable death, against the Morvathi, over a planet neither side wanted anymore." Drennick's voice was flat, empty. "He fought for 60 years, killed thousands, lost 2 arms, watched his brothers die. And for what? The war continues. Nothing changes. Nothing ever changes." Daniel sat down beside him. He didn't say anything wise. He didn't offer solutions. He just sat there, present, listening. "Do you know why we fight?" Drennick asked eventually. "The sacred planet, Hollow's Rest." "That's what they tell us, but my grandfather told me something different before I left. He said no one remembers anymore. The original reason, the actual dispute. It's been so long that the war just is. We fight because we've always fought. We hate because we've always hated." "What if you stopped?" Drennick laughed bitterly. "Then what would we be? Our entire society is built around the war, our economy, our government, our identity. Without the Morvathi to hate, who are we?" Daniel had no answer, but he had an idea. On the Morvathi carrier, a similar conversation was happening. Malix was a drone tender, lowest caste, no voice in government, no rights, no future except service. But Daniel had fixed the humidity in his section, and for some reason Daniel kept coming back, asking questions, listening to answers, treating Malix like he mattered. "Why do you care?" Malix asked one evening. "I am nothing, worker caste. My opinions mean nothing. My life means nothing." "Says who?" "Everyone, the hive mothers, the queen, the history. Workers work, warriors fight, leaders lead. This is the way." "What if it wasn't?" Malix's antennae twitched. Dangerous thought, forbidden thought. Then everything would change. "Is that bad?" No answer, but the silence wasn't empty. It was full of something that had been locked away for generations, something that looked a lot like hope. Daniel built one more thing: communication devices, small, simple, undetectable by ship security. He gave one to Drennick, one to Malix. He gave them to every crew member who had shared something real with him. "What are these?" Grawl asked when Daniel handed him one. "A way to talk to the other side, directly, without command listening in." Grawl nearly dropped it. "This is treason." "It's a conversation. That's all. Just 2 people talking. You don't have to use it. But if you ever wonder what the Morvathi are actually like, if you ever want to hear something other than propaganda, just press the button." Daniel walked away. He didn't look back. 3 days later, at exactly midnight by ship time, Grawl pressed the button. On the Morvathi carrier, Chelik's device lit up. They stared at each other through the tiny screens. 2 soldiers who had spent their entire lives being told to hate what they were now seeing. "Human," Grawl said slowly, "what have you done?" But the question wasn't for Daniel. It was for the Morvathi officer blinking back at him. "I don't know," Chelik replied, "but I think we should talk." Across the void between 2 warships, enemies became voices. Voices became people. And people, Daniel knew, were much harder to kill than enemies. The real weapons had been deployed. Now he just had to wait for them to work. Admiral Sorven found out first. A junior officer reported strange behavior among the crew. People whispering, devices that shouldn't exist, communications that bypassed all security. He traced it back to Daniel in 6 hours. "Arrest him," Sorven ordered. On the Morvathi carrier, Ambassador Trellis discovered the same thing. Workers talking to enemies, information flowing between ships, a network that had grown from a handful of devices to over 300 in just 2 weeks. "Execute him," Trellis commanded. Neither order was carried out. When the security teams arrived at Daniel's quarters, they found crew members blocking the door. Not fighting, just standing, hundreds of them. Drennics and Morvathi who had tasted something they'd never experienced before. "Connection." Sorven called for reinforcements. Grand Marshal Torvax arrived with 6 additional warships. He was the supreme commander of all Drennick's forces, a legend, a monster. He had personally burned 14 Morvathi worlds. Queen Admiral Sistrix came with 8 carriers. She ruled the Morvathi military with absolute power. Her decisions had ended millions of lives. She had never lost a battle. They met in neutral space, fleets facing each other, weapons armed. And in the middle of it all, Daniel waited. "You violated every term of your authority," Torvax growled through the viewscreen. "You were sent to inspect weapons. Instead, you created an insurgency." "I created conversations," Daniel corrected. "You undermined our command structure. Our soldiers are questioning orders, questioning the war itself." "Good." Sistrix cut in. "The human must be destroyed. He has infected our ships with weakness. Our workers speak of peace, peace, after 200 years of blood." "Why is peace weakness?" Daniel asked. "Because they will kill us the moment we lower our guard," Sistrix hissed. "This is a trick, a manipulation. You have helped the Drennicks poison our minds." Torvax laughed coldly. "We say the same about you. The human has clearly been working with the Morvathi to weaken our resolve." Daniel let them argue. He had been waiting for this moment. "I'd like to show you something," he said. "With the Council's permission, I'm activating the broadcast system." Councillor Yurix, observing from Station Helix 7, approved the request. Every screen in both fleets flickered to life. First came the evidence: hidden weapons, planet killers, biological arsenals that violated every treaty ever signed. Daniel showed it all: the secret caches, the forbidden technologies, the lies both sides had told. Torvax and Sistrix went rigid, their deceptions exposed to the entire galactic community. But Daniel wasn't finished. "Now watch this," he said. The screens changed, conversations appeared. Grawl talking to Chelik about their families, Drennick asking Malix about Morvathi music. Drennick's grandmother sharing recipes with a Morvathi elder. Thousands of moments, thousands of connections. Soldiers who had been taught to hate, learning to understand. "Your people don't want this war," Daniel said quietly. "They never did. They fight because you tell them to. They hate because you taught them to. But underneath all that, they're just people, tired people, grieving people, people who want to go home." Torvax's voice was dangerous. "You think this changes anything? You think a few conversations erase 200 years? No, but I think it proves that those 200 years were built on a lie." Daniel pulled up one final file, historical records, deeply classified. It had taken Kira 3 days to decrypt them. "The original dispute over Hollow's Rest was resolved," Daniel said. 203 years ago, both species agreed to share the planet. The treaty was signed by your ancestors, Marshal, and yours, Queen Admiral." Silence, absolute silence. "But the treaty was never implemented. Your government suppressed it. Because by then, too many people were profiting from the war. Weapons manufacturers, military leaders, politicians who needed enemies to stay in power." The galaxy watched, the fleets watched, Torvax and Sistrix watched. "You've been fighting a war that was supposed to end before most of your soldiers were born," Daniel continued. "Every death, every burned world, every orphan and widow, all of it was unnecessary. All of it was a choice made by people who benefited from your suffering." Torvax's scales had gone pale. Sistrix's mandibles were trembling. "You can kill me," Daniel said. "You can destroy these ships. You can go back to war and pretend none of this happened. But your people have seen the truth now. Your people have talked to each other, and you can't undo that." He paused. "Or you can be the leaders who finally ended it, the ones who looked at 2 centuries of pointless death and said enough. History will remember this moment. What do you want to be remembered for?" The silence stretched. Fleet commanders waited for orders. Weapons systems hummed with readiness. Finally, Queen Admiral Sistrix spoke. "Human, if we stop fighting, what do we become?" Daniel thought about the question. It was the same thing Drennick had asked, the same fear that kept the war alive. Identity built on hatred, purpose built on destruction. You become something new, he answered. Something better, and you won't have to figure it out alone. Sistrix looked at Torvax. Torvax looked at Sistrix. For the first time in 200 years, they weren't looking at an enemy. They were looking at a possibility. The conference room on Station Helix 7 had been designed for exactly 12 beings. 43 were packed inside. They had been arguing for 9 hours. We cannot simply stop, Admiral Sorvan insisted. Our entire economy is built on war production. Millions of Drenics work in weapons factories. If we stop, they starve. Same for us, Ambassador Trellis agreed. The hive workers have no other purpose. Without the war, they have no identity. Daniel listened. He had expected this. Fear of change was always stronger than fear of death. What if you didn't stop? He asked. Everyone turned to look at him. Grand Marshal Torvax's eyes narrowed. Explain. Your factories build weapons. They're good at it. Your workers are skilled, but weapons aren't the only thing that requires precision manufacturing. Daniel pulled up projections on the main screen. Colony ships, terraforming equipment, medical supplies, agricultural systems. The same skills that build planet killers can build planet healers. You want us to become farmers? Queen Admiral Sistrix sounded insulted. I want you to become builders, both of you together. The room erupted. Drenics shouted about honor. Morvathi clicked about tradition. Old hatreds flared back to life. Daniel waited. He had learned that sometimes silence was louder than words. Eventually, they exhausted themselves. The shouting stopped. The clicking faded. There's something else you need to hear, Daniel said. May I bring in 2 witnesses? He didn't wait for permission. The door opened. 2 ancient beings entered. Elder historian Vorak was the oldest living Drenix. His scales had faded to gray. His eyes had seen the war's first battle. Memory keeper Dulith was equally aged. Her exoskeleton was cracked with time. She had preserved records that most Morvathi didn't know existed. Tell them, Daniel said. Vorak spoke first. His voice was thin but clear. I was there when the war began, young, foolish, full of fire. We were told the Morvathi had desecrated our sacred site, killed our priests. We believed it because we wanted to believe it. Dulith continued. I was told the same about the Drenics, that they had slaughtered our pilgrims, burned our temples. I believed it too. But it wasn't true, Vorak said. Decades later, I found the original reports. There was no massacre. A storm had destroyed both temples. Both species lost pilgrims, but someone decided it was more useful to blame each other than nature. Who? Torvax demanded. Leaders, Dulith answered. On both sides, they saw an opportunity. War means power. War means control. War means no one questions authority because everyone is too busy surviving. The peace treaty was real, Vorak added. I witnessed it signed. 3 days later, the signers were dead, assassinated by their own governments. The room was deathly silent. For 200 years, Dulith said, we have been killing each other over a lie. A lie told by people who died before most of you were born, and we kept believing it because stopping was harder than fighting. Torvax stood very still. His entire existence had been built on this war, his honor, his legacy, his purpose. All of it was built on a foundation of manufactured hatred. Why didn't you speak before? He asked Vorak. I tried once. I was nearly executed for treason. After that, I kept silent. Cowardice, I admit it, but now, Vorak looked at Daniel. Now someone has created a space where truth can be spoken. I will not waste it. Sistrix turned to Dulith. You kept these records. Why? Because truth matters, even when no one wants to hear it, even when it changes nothing. Dulith's antennae drooped. I hoped someday someone would listen. I never thought it would be a human. Daniel stepped forward. You asked what you become without the war. Here's my answer. You become the species that ended 2 centuries of lies. You become the leaders who chose truth over tradition. You become the first generation that built something instead of destroying it. He pulled up a new projection. The contested planet, Hollow's Rest. It's still radioactive, still uninhabitable, but it doesn't have to stay that way. With your combined resources, you could terraform it in 30 years, make it green again, make it sacred again, not as a trophy for one side, but as a memorial for everyone who died for nothing. Torvax and Sistrix looked at the projection. A dead world, their dead world, killed by their war. And in building it, Daniel continued, you'd need workers, engineers, scientists, Drenix and Morvathi working side by side, not because they've forgotten the past, but because they've decided the future matters more. This is idealism, Sorven muttered. Pretty words, reality is harder. Yes, Daniel agreed. It is. Peace is harder than war, building is harder than destroying, trust is harder than hate, but you've done hard things your entire lives. You survived, you fought, you endured. He looked at each of them, predators, conquerors, killers. I'm asking you to do something harder. I'm asking you to hope. Torvax extended his clawed hand toward Sistrix, not to strike, not to threaten. An offer. Sistrix hesitated. 200 years of instinct screamed at her to refuse, to fight, to destroy. But something else was louder now, something that had been growing since the first conversation between enemies, something that looked a lot like exhaustion, and under that, buried deep, something that might have been relief. She extended her limb. They didn't touch, not yet. The distance between them was still too great. But they were facing each other, weapons lowered, eyes open. It was a beginning. 6 months later, the first tree was planted on Hollow's Rest. Daniel watched from the observation deck of the construction station. Below him, the planet was still gray and scarred. But in one small section, machines were pumping clean atmosphere. Drenix engineers operated terraforming equipment while Morvathi biologists monitored soil composition. They worked together, argued together, solved problems together. Nobody had died in 6 months. Kira stood beside him. You know this is impossible, right? Statistically impossible. 2 species that spent 2 centuries killing each other don't just stop. They didn't stop, Daniel said. They redirected. All that energy they used for war, it's still there. They're just building instead of destroying. The door opened behind them. Grawl walked in. He looked different now. The constant tension in his shoulders had eased. The chair Daniel had built for him was now standard issue on every Drenix ship. The memorial design is approved, Grawl reported. Both councils agreed, twin statues, one Drenix, one Morvathi, facing each other. Not fighting. No, hands extended, reaching. Grawl paused. It was Drenix's idea. He said it should represent what could have been, what finally is. Drenix now commanded a construction vessel with a mixed crew. He had named it First Word after the first conversation between enemies. His Morvathi co-commander was Malix, the former drone tender who had never spoken to an alien before Daniel came along. They argued constantly, about schedules, about methods, about whose music was worse. They had never been happier. The Queen Admiral wishes to speak with you, Grawl added. Daniel found Sistrix in the station's central hub. She was reviewing construction reports with Torvax. The 2 supreme commanders still couldn't be in the same room without tension, but it was productive tension now. Competition to build faster, better, more efficiently. Human, Sistrix said, the Council has decided you are to be granted the highest honor both species can give. I appreciate that, but I didn't do this for honors. We know, Torvax said. That's why you deserve it. Every other species in the galaxy plays games, politics, manipulation. You just fix things, chairs, humidity systems, conversations. Small things that became everything. Sistrix's mandibles clicked softly. We have been trying to understand. Why did you do it? Your species gains nothing from our peace. If anything, you lose. 2 weak enemies are better than 2 strong neighbors. Daniel thought about the question. He had asked himself the same thing during long nights on the shuttle between ships. Humans aren't new to war, he said finally. We spent most of our history killing each other, over land, over religion, over ideas. We got very good at it. Then why help us stop? Because we also learned something. War is easy, peace is hard, but peace is worth more. Every generation that doesn't have to fight is a generation that can build, create, dream, and eventually those generations make things that the fighting generations never could. He looked out the window at the planet below. I saw two species drowning in a war they'd forgotten the reason for. I saw soldiers who wanted to go home but didn't know how. I saw leaders who needed permission to stop. He shrugged. So I gave them permission. Torvax made a sound that might have been laughter. You gave permission to two galactic superpowers. Someone had to. Ambassador Trellis entered the hub. Behind him came Admiral Sorvan and Hive Sister Chelik. They had all changed, not completely. Old habits and old hatreds still surfaced, but they were trying. Every day they were trying. The dedication ceremony begins in 1 hour, Trellis announced. Both fleets are in position. The galaxy is watching. They all moved toward the ceremony hall. Daniel hung back. Kira waited with him. What are you thinking? She asked. I'm thinking about my original orders. Disarm them completely. You did. Their planet killers are being converted into terraforming stations. Their weapons factories are building colony ships. Their armies are becoming construction crews. I didn't take their weapons away. I just gave them something better to do with them. The ceremony was simple. No grand speeches, no political theater, just the unveiling of the memorial foundation. Two statues reaching toward each other across a gap that was finally closing. Adrenic's child stood in the front row. She was too young to understand the war. She had been born after the ceasefire. All she knew was that her parents worked with Morvathi now, that they came home every night, that the world was getting greener. She asked the Morvathi worker beside her a question. What do the statues mean? The worker, who had lost 3 Hive siblings in the war, looked at the reaching hands. They mean we finally learned, she said, that hands are better at building than destroying. After the ceremony, Daniel received a message from Counselor Urix. The Council wishes to assign you to a new conflict. The Velron and Keth have been fighting for 90 years. They need a neutral inspector to oversee disarmament. Daniel smiled. Send me the details. Kira shook her head. Here we go again. Got a problem with that? No, she grinned. I'm just wondering what you're going to build this time. Daniel looked back at Hollow's Rest one last time. A dead world coming back to life. 2 species learning to live together. A future that shouldn't exist but did anyway. Whatever they need, he said, that's what humans do. In his quarters later, Daniel found a note from Ambassador Trellis. It contained a single line that would become famous across the galaxy. Never ask a human to disarm anyone. They will find a way to make peace look like victory for everyone, and there is no defense against that. Daniel laughed and started packing. He had work to do. The galaxy had a lot of wars that needed ending.